Fund, which launched late last year. On the call, I'm Hannah Taylor-Moore, Fund and Project Manager here at SIB. We've also got Christian Stannard, who's Relationship Manager also at SIB, and John Heaney, who's our Head of Credit and Risk. We've also got a couple of other colleagues, Martin and Emily. They're mostly cameras off in the background, making sure everything runs smoothly from a tech side. So you may not see them, but they'll be there trying to collate all of your questions and bits and bobs. You'll also see that we have a lot of people from our partnership on the call as well. They're here to kind of, engage with you, answer any questions that you may have. And it's a really good opportunity for you guys to put them on the hot seat. If you have any particular burning questions for any particular member of our partnership, please do put a message specifically in the chat. And if it's for a particular person, then highlight who it's for. Because this is a great chance for you to ask them any questions. So just to go over the plan for today, I'll talk more on our partnership and the aims of the fund, the background. Christian will talk through the fund product, what you can receive for the fund, as well as the eligibility criteria and the application process that you might experience should you want to put in an application. And then we'll do a bit of a summary and give you guys an opportunity to ask any questions that you have. We have a couple of pre-submitted questions, but if you do have any questions, just put them in the chat function. If you could save them for the Q&A at the end, just so that we don't miss any. And obviously, if you do post it earlier, just refresh our memories near the end, because we'll be collating them, but we don't want any to be missed. If there's anything you don't understand, though, as we go through the slides, any clarifications, please just put them in the chat as we go, and we'll try and clarify. Christian, if I don't see them pop up, just flag to me, because I can't necessarily see with the screen sharing. So without further ado, we will kick off. So as I mentioned, this fund, whilst it's managed by SIB, we are the lender, if you like, for anyone that applies to the fund. We are delivering it in partnership. We are a partnership of 9 partners, so there's lots of us, and as I said, lots of them on the call today. These are all of the lovely partners that we're in the background for. We would do work with partners on the majority of our funds. We think that working in partnership makes us stronger and better able to meet the needs of the sector, because you're such a great diverse range of organisations. We couldn't hope to meet all of you on our own, so our lovely partners help with that. And for ERF specifically, we really wanted to work in partnership to reach different areas of the sector that maybe there's lots of people at different stages of their energy resilience journey. Some people that don't know much about it at all, or you may be quite well developed in your energy resilience journey, and you've kind of got a lot of information. So our partners are being really helpful in kind of reaching different sectors, different areas of expertise, but also just people that are at different stages of their journey as well. So as a background to the fund is the successor to the pilot Energy Resilience Fund, which was managed by Key Fund. Key Fund are a partner on the Energy Resilience Fund. I don't believe they are on this call at the minute, because they're still tidying up a little bit to do with the pre-call, but they will be kind of working on this as well. The fund has around 15 million to provide a blended funding package of grant and loan to eligible charities and social enterprises in England. So as we'll go on later, is a 60% loan, 40% grant. You can't have the grant without the loan, just heading that up. But hopefully providing blended funding in this way will help us also reach a lot of organisations that maybe were thinking of taking on social finance, but for whatever reason you haven't yet taken that step, or maybe you've taken it in a smaller way and you're looking to kind of grow and diversify your income streams. And to reach kind of smaller organisations that wouldn't necessarily be able to afford mainstream lending or kind of social investment in a larger way without that grant backup support. And ultimately, we're hoping that kind of by delivering this fund and enabling outreach of energy resilience measures, we will be able to help you guys, organisations, charities, social enterprises to build resilience by building your energy efficiency and your capabilities to deal with kind of any peaks and troughs that may pop up over the next couple of years. So I'm going to pass over to Christian, who's going to talk more about the fund product. And as I said, I'll take back over towards the end.
Thanks, Hannah, and obviously thank you to everybody giving up a time over lunch, obviously, to come to the webinar and hear a little bit more about the fund. So very basically, the fund will provide two things. It will provide energy audits, if required, and then it will provide a larger investment to improve energy resilience. Like Hannah said, obviously on the last slide, this is a blended finance product. Lots of people in the room might know what that means. For those that don't, with a blended investment product, there's always an element of loan and there is always an element of grant. Again, just worth reiterating, the fund does not provide standalone grants for energy resilience work, so the package is always going to be 60% of a loan and 40% of a grant. So Hannah, can you just go on to the next slide for me, please? So in terms of the energy audits, quite a lot of information up there on that slide, so I'll kind of let you read through it. The highlights of it, I think obviously the most important thing for this call, if you are applying for standalone equipment or vehicles, which you can do under the fund, you do not require an energy audit or an independent energy assessment. So if it's around improving, I don't know, obviously buying new kind of refrigerators or kind of new kitchen equipment that's more energy efficient, or it's about buying electric vehicles, you will not have to go through the process of obviously getting an energy audit. If it's around energy resilience around buildings, so whether it's insulation or providing, kind of energy production things like, solar panels or wind turbines, everything else is going to require the energy audit or the independent energy assessment. If you've already got one of those, we can accept it, but it has to be dated within the last 2 years. An SIB will need to review it to make sure that it is suitable. There's a lot of different firms out there providing these. There's not much in the way of standardization. Some of them are really good and fit, give us the information that we need. Some of them are not so good. So if you've got one, you can provide it to us. We will review it. And then if it's acceptable, fine. If it's not, then the fund will pay for one, and we have a panel of approved providers. So we have a degree of standardization and we know what information we're going to get. The other thing that's important point now is if we fund an energy audit, it is not a guarantee of further investment. So just because we do the energy audit doesn't mean ultimately you will be successful in getting the investment package. But at the same time, we would only, we will take a view on how investable you are before we start funding energy audits, because that's not what the fund's not just around energy audits, around doing energy audits that lead to the larger investment package. But if you do get one, it's not a guarantee. With the energy audit, some further follow-up support, is available if required. So that's like further updates to the report if needed. And there's then, like I say, there's some time in to have a call to, because what your energy audit might do, it might kind of recommend a raft of energy saving measures, and it might be a lot of work to take on in one go, or it may be very, very expensive. So we can work with you to kind of prioritize which of these are kind of obviously the best ones to do straight away. Hannah, can we move on to capital investment? So in terms of the capital investment itself, so I'm just getting notes up. So in terms of how much obviously the fund is, it's a minimum of £25,000. It's a maximum of £250,000. And again, that is inclusive of the 40% grant. In terms of the loan term, it's a minimum of 1 year, a maximum of 10. And that's inclusive of any capital repayment holiday. The capital repayment holiday, that's something we can provide at the start of the kind of the investment. So for the first 12 months, you will pay interest only. It's always incredibly useful if you're doing some work that's going to kind of prevent revenue generation out of the building. So for the first 12 months, you simply pay the interest. That gives you a lower monthly repayment. And it is optional, you don't have to take it. But then obviously, if you do take that 12 months, that you then have a 9-year term, obviously, to repay the capital and repayment. In terms of the interest rate, it is 8.5%. That is fixed. So it doesn't matter what happens to Bank of England base rate. If it goes up, your payment does not go up. If it goes down, unfortunately, your payment doesn't go down. But what it does, it gives you surety for the term of the loan to know this is what our monthly repayment is. And you just, like you said, it makes planning so much easier because you're not having to think about base rate and stuff like that. In terms of the arrangement fee, we always charge arrangement fees on our loans. It's 2.5%. but it's worth noting that it is on the loan element only. You will not pay an arrangement fee on the grant. So as an example, if you needed £100,000, an investment of that would look like a loan of £60,000, a grant of £40,000, and your arrangement fee would be like 1,500 quid, because that is 2% of 60,000. So again, it's only ever on the loan element, it's not on the grant element. Investments are unsecured, so we will not be taking charges over buildings. We will not be taking kind of charges over assets or anything like that. So it's unsecured lending. And the way we calculate interest is we calculate it daily and charge it monthly. You make a payment via direct debit. It's just like the way your kind of residential mortgage works. And it is the fairest way of calculating interest, I think, because you will only ever pay interest on the amount that you owe. So at the start, you owe 60. A month later, you might only owe 59. That's fine. You're only paying the interest on the 59. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So in terms of the eligibility criteria, again, there's quite a lot here. I'll let you read through that. I'll pick out a couple of the main ones. Everything that we do as a social investor is for charities and social enterprises. We have quite a broad definition of that. If you're a registered charity, company limited by guarantee, you may be a community interest company limited by guarantee, community interest company limited by shares, a CIO, they're all fine. If you're sitting there as a company limited by shares, but you have 3 things in your governance documents, we can invest in you as well as kind of community benefit societies and all those different mutual models. What we're interested in is, in terms of your governance documents, do you have a social mission in there? Do you have an asset lock in there? And do you have a rule on distribution of profits? That is, no more than 50% of profits are kind of distributed. I would imagine the vast majority of people on this call are sitting in organisations that will fulfil that criteria. So again, charity and social enterprise. You must be based in England. And the reason for that is because of the source of the grant funding that's allowing us to blend it. We can only use that in England. You need to have been going for a minimum of 2 years. So you can't be a very early age startup. You need a minimum turnover of at least 100,000 in the last financial year. And again, the reason we ask for those 2 criteria is because of the loan element. There is a repayable element, and you need to have had, some trading history, and you need to have got a certain size to be able to afford kind of loan repayments. Again, it's all around energy resilience. So if you come to me and say, well, we need something for the cash flow for a public sector contract, sorry, we can't fund it. We have an alternative fund that could do that. But this is all around energy saving measures or generation technology to buildings or land, and that can be old buildings, it can be new builds, or to purchase energy efficient or environmentally friendly vehicles. In terms of buildings, if you own the freehold of a building, brilliant, that's fine, you own it, no issue. If it's leased, we ask for a minimum lease term of 12 years. And you also need to have the permission of the landlord, obviously, to be able to do the work. The reason that the minimum lease term is 12 years is because ultimately you may be taking a loan of 10 years. So you need to have the benefit and access to the building to be able to generate the income to then be able to service the loan. So if you've got more than 12 years, brilliant. If it's less than 12 years, we can have a discussion about it, but you wouldn't technically be eligible under the criteria. Vehicles and equipment. Obviously, a lot of people go out and lease electric vehicles now. We will not fund leasing costs. You have to own the vehicle, and it has to sit on your balance sheet. So if you think, well, we might lease an electric minibus, and that's a cheaper way of doing it, unfortunately, we can't do that. And you have to have a viable borrowing proposal. Again, it's blended. There's an element of grant. But what we would never do is set an organisation up to fail. So if you can't afford to repay the loan, then unfortunately it's not one for you, because what we don't want to do is lend you money and then you get into trouble trying to service the loan. Can everyone go to the next slide? So yeah, sorry. In terms of what a can't fund, yeah, sorry. So some of the stuff that it cannot fund. So if your independent energy assessment audit says You know, if it's not on there, basically we can't fund it. Untested technology, community energy, heating generation projects, or things like district heat networks, or, you know, kind of solar farms. So if it's around generating electricity and then be sold back to the national grid, and obviously they can't do stuff like that. Hybrid electric vehicles, obviously they're very popular now. Vehicles, they have to be fully electric. So, you know, you need to be able to plug them in rather than kind of fill them up. Refinancing of existing debt. Some organisations might have already done this and taken on lending to do it. We typically won't do it unless it's really exceptional circumstances. If anybody's in that position, we can have a kind of conversation with them. And a couple of ineligible sectors, like more social investment, we can't fund statutory services. So if it's a school or hospital, something like that. And buildings or sections of buildings, primarily for worship or furtherance of faith or political campaigning. My understanding is if it's a church, and you have some community space that isn't used, obviously, for kind of religious activities, we can fund the community space, but we couldn't fund, like we said, the wider kind of facility. And then if we can just go to the next one, please, Hannah. Thank you. So funding purpose, I mean, again, I'm not going to run through these one by one. You can see we will fund a whole raft of different measures. If there's something that you have in mind that isn't up there, and I think we've captured all the kind of the really major ones. I'm learning about some of the stuff on here that I didn't know about. But as long as it's not specifically excluded, it's worth picking up the phone and talking to us to see if we can, whether we can do it or not. Just a couple of things that I think it's important to highlight. We cover all the costs of the capital project, so that's obviously equipment, it's the labour, it's project management, but there's a couple of things that we fund that people might not expect us to. So work's required to implement the energy efficiency measures. The best example I've seen of this recently was somebody was wanting to put solar panels on the roof. They did a survey of the roof. The roof wasn't strong enough to support them. They had actually already gone out and got the funding for the solar panels, so they are talking to us about doing the remedial works to the roof. That is fine. We can do that. We can, so, you know, if you need to change the fabric of the building to enable the energy saving or the production measures, that is absolutely fine. We can do that. Again, I mentioned it before, if buildings are kind of off limits and you're, you know, while you're doing the work and you're generating revenue from that building, we can fund the loss of revenue while the work is being completed. So, you know, I think that's a really important measure and makes it accessible. And the other thing that we can fund that, building management systems and the training for staff in buildings management as well. So it's not just all about, we'll fund the solar panels, we'll fund obviously the turbines, we'll fund the insulation. We can do lots of stuff around that that will allow you to be able to do that. We'll go to the next one, Hannah, the application. Again, quite a lot of information in here. I'm not going to go through it, obviously, box by box. Main things to be aware of, the application form, like all of our application forms, is designed to be relatively light touch. I often describe it like more of an expression of interest. If you've got the information, and we ask about your organisation, we ask about who you are, we ask about where you work, we ask about where you're based, we ask about obviously what you want to do with investment. The application should never take more than about 30 minutes. It's not a 20-page application form. It's a relatively light touch. Hannah spoke about the partners and the way we work with them and the reasons we work with them. You can choose the partner that you work with. So if you are a heritage organisation, you may want to work obviously with Architectural Heritage Fund. If you're doing something that fits in with like the work that Groundwork does around kind of environment, you may well want to go with Groundwork, or you can work with SIB. So you choose which partner you work with. We don't kind of prescribe that. SIB is responsible for the energy audit review. So again, if you've got one, we can look at it and we can see whether that's acceptable or not. If it's suitable, that's fine. You can go straight through the stage 2 assessment process. If not, obviously we send off and we get you one done and then we go through the stage 2 process. The assessment process, we look at things like the organisation, we look at things like the people, we look at things like the proposal, we look at the financial stuff, but it's basically, we're looking, you know, testing eligibility and testing the viability of the kind of the financial risk as well. The final decision-making authority is with the SIB External Investment Committee, so specifically for this fund. In terms of the involvement of, once it's been agreed, It will then come back to a social investment business. We will be responsible for doing obviously investment setup, and we will be responsible for the portfolio management going forward. So even if you do your assessment with Groundwork or Key Fund or Big Issue Investor, whoever it may be, ultimately your relationship will be with social investment business. A lot of people will want to know what the decision-making timeline is, and people say, "Well, what's the average?" I can never give an average because there's too many variables. It's the quality of the energy audit, it's how developed your plans are, it's how quick you are in terms of coming back, obviously, with kind of requests for further information and assessment meetings and all that kind of stuff. I always tell people it will be a minimum of 2 months just to try and manage expectations. Investment committee meets once a month, so that there's a factor in that, but that's really a minimum. It could be longer than that, but a lot of it just depends on the variables that I mentioned. In terms of supporting documents, again, this goes back to us trying to keep it light touch. Last 2 years of accounts, your management accounts, and minimum 12-month cash flow forecast. That's what we ask for standard. We may ask you to extend your cash flow forecast through the assessment process if we feel like we need it. Again, for standalone vehicles and equipment, that's it. If we're investing in buildings, we're also going to need to see a copy of the title deeds or the lease. And once you go into the assessment process, so this is something we will ask for, so it may be worth putting it together. We also need to see 12 months of kind of gas and electricity bills. But again, you don't need to provide that with your application. That comes further down in the assessment process. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Christian. Yeah, so just to summarise, really, what we've talked about today, obviously the Energy Resilience Fund, as Christian and I have mentioned, is a blended loan and grant funding, so you can't have the grant without the loan, but we are hoping that the 40% grant element is kind of a really comfortable buffer for you, for anyone that's particularly new to social investment, or even if you're just kind of, we recognise that the payback period for energy resilience measures is quite long, and it's not necessarily cost saving in the short term. So this 40% grant kind of gives you a bit more of a buffer and hopefully makes your step into energy resilience a little bit more comfortable. As Christian's mentioned, and as that slide, there are lots and lots of things that we can fund. We have quite flexible funding options. We are privileged to be able to discuss this quite a lot in the early stages. We can cover buildings, vehicles and equipment, and also kind of enabling works and any kind of capital on costs that are directly related to energy saving measures. So obviously everything that we fund has to be directly related to saving energy, cutting CO2. But yeah, it is quite flexible, and that slide was definitely not exhaustive. It was more just exhaustive of things that we could personally think about. But if you guys have any new suggestions, please send them our way, because yeah, it's always good to see that list getting longer, and it's always good for us to consider new options that we haven't thought about. The fund, as we said, has quite flexible terms. There's no penalty for early repayment. As Christian mentioned, we can also offer capital repayment holiday at the beginning of the loan of 12 months where you will only pay interest. So hopefully that also offers a bit more flexibility to your repayments as you're getting settled after taking it on. The application form, as Christian said, is very straightforward. We don't ask for reams and reams of information. It's more just focused and in terms of getting your application through the door. You get a dedicated relationship manager, both within SIB and externally within the partnership, that will talk you through every stage of your application. They're on hand for any questions that you may have, even if it's just, I don't know what to put in this section, or I don't know quite how to build this particular element of our organisation up. Your partner will be very happy to talk that through with you. So they are very friendly and very approachable. I realise I'm talking about ourselves, but hopefully you can kind of believe that. And yeah, hopefully it's quite a supportive and transparent process. We do keep you updated at every stage of your application journey. You will know exactly where your application is, whether it's been sent to audit, whether it's come back, whether you're at stage 1 or stage 2 assessment. Your partner and SIB as a whole will keep you very well updated with where that is. And yeah, the fund and all of the partnership in general has a really strong focus on social outcomes and impact. So even if there are some of the eligibility criteria that we can't be flexible on, which we will highlight like on the website and maybe in the conversations, but a lot of there are some elements of the eligibility criteria that we can be a little bit more flexible on if you do have particularly strong social outcomes and impact. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so that you can see everyone's faces if anyone wants to ask questions. As I mentioned, you can put any questions in the chat function. I can see now that I've come out of sharing that there are questions that Rob has very kindly been coming back to in the chat. So I will leave him to, I think he's come back. I think there's just one final question in there about, can you put in a multi-site application or are you only able to apply for funding on a specific site? The answer to that would be, I think we answered that, or I don't know if that's been answered, but I will just answer that now. You can apply for multi-sites, but it would be a separate application per site. This is just because all of the energy data is specifically related to a site. So we need to kind of have that in per site so that it can all be matched up. But yeah, you're more than welcome to put in as many applications. Kind of, if it's affordable, you can put it in there. I think there's another question. I'm going to throw it to you, Christian. Can there be several energy saving projects applied for on one site?
My understanding is yes, they can, but as the project manager, is that the correct answer?
Yeah, so basically,
Yeah.
if you've got a previous energy audit or you get an energy audit through the fund, through the partnership, you can have as many energy saving measures that are proven to be kind of viable, relevant for your organization. So if you're coming with a previous energy audit, some of them can be quite generic, and our internal teams will look at this because some auditors will go around and just say, oh yeah, you can have solar panels, you can have glazing, you can have this, that, and it will be quite generic. If we don't think that it will particularly help your organization or your specific building, then we may have a conversation with you about that, because we obviously don't want you taking on any loan finance for anything that's not relevant and that's not going to make you more energy resilient or save you money in the future. But if there are relevant measures on your audit and there are multiple things that you want, then yes, you can apply for as many as is financially viable for you to take on. I think Rob's come back to most of these questions. We did have a couple of questions before. I'm just bringing up for the people that managed to pre-submit questions. Bear with me. So I think one of the questions that we had was in relation to works that have already started, whether you could get funding when you're already on site, when you've already started your work. And the answer to that is yes. As Christian mentioned, we are able to fund enabling work. So if you do, I think Christian mentioned the example of solar panels, like if you do have funding elsewhere and you have started a project, but you discover that there's extra works that need to be done in the meantime, we can provide support and funding for that, provided that the works for the specific element that we are funding haven't started prior to approval. So, for example, in the case that Christian mentioned where someone had got funding for solar panels elsewhere, they discovered that there needed to be some changes to the roof being made. We were funding that element, so they couldn't start implementing that change until they'd had the kind of funding approved from us. This is just, from an affordability point of view as well. We want to make sure that people, you're applying to the fund because you need the funding for this particular work, but also it's just, if that's the project. But we don't need the whole project to have started from kind of day dot. That can already be in the works. I think we've covered quite a bit. We've had a few questions in about boilers. We are able to fund new boilers, but it has to be as part of a wider retrofit plan. So you have to be kind of moving towards a larger energy retrofit journey. We won't just be approving them as kind of one-off, boiler replacements if the boiler's a bit old. It does have to be part of a larger scale kind of considered approach. So that would be a case where we would want you to have an energy audit to get more information about the energy resilience of your organization as a whole, and yeah, the journey that you're undertaking on there. I don't know if anyone else has any other questions. I know that everyone's putting them in the chat. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question if you do. And otherwise, I don't know if any of the partners, if you want to say anything about working on the fund, if you have anything particular that you want to highlight to anyone that might have come along to that's thinking of working with you. If anyone does want to say anything, speak now. Everyone's shy today, apparently. Okay. Great. Give me a shout if there's anyone that I know that Rob's been very kindly replying to the messages in the chat. If there is a question that you haven't had a response to, if you just want to highlight it now, either you can say it or just put it in there. If you have any other questions that are, specific to your organization or that you don't want to share in this medium, please do drop a message. I'm going to share my screen and share partner contact information. If I can get this up. So here is all of the information. If you want to contact any of the partners, if you do have any questions in the meantime, everyone is more than happy to come back, even if it's just a really specific eligibility criteria or a minor question about how the fund is going to work. Please feel free to reach out to us. And if no one has anything else to add, I will say thank you for listening. Thank you for giving up your lunch break and spending it listening to us, Gaston. And yeah, hopefully we'll be talking to a lot of you in the future. Yeah, just reach out to us and good luck with your journeys wherever you are at with them.
Thank you. It's really great. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.